has agreed to be with us this evening. And so I want to turn this program over to him right now. Please welcome Daleiden.
People say things like I came out of the blue or came out of nowhere, but in reality, I didn't come out of nowhere. I for years have studied your work, have quoted pieces in debate speeches when I was in high school and all kinds of stuff. So people like me don't just come out of the blue. We come off of a foundation that all of your hard work for many, many decades is built. And so if I can be a little part of the fruits of that labor, that's what I aspire to be. So thank you for everything that you've done. I am, as Monica mentioned, I do have kind of a crazy travel schedule, so I'm actually starting to get a little bit sick, so I apologize if my voice is a little raspy or if I start to become inarticulate. I have been known, especially once I really get going, to kind of go on and on and on, and I want to honor that we have a limited time here, and I want to leave time for questions at the end. So what I can advise you or invite you to do is if I do start to go on for far too long and it starts to get boring or insufferable, you can always call the California Attorney General's office and they will be happy. They will be happy to send 11 DOJ agents to carry me out of the church. I will try to claim sanctuary, but that's not as long as America. Body parts trafficking first came across my radar. It was in the summer of 2010. I had a 3-hour-long conversation with Mark Crutcher, who many of you are probably familiar with, the head of Life Dynamics out in Texas, whose organization back in 1999-2000 did a very seminal expose of the aborted baby body parts trafficking issue. And really, that was the only time that issue had ever really been a part of the popular discourse. It was the only time that a major pro-life group had really looked into the entire issue. And 10 years later, in 2010, there wasn't a whole lot of information out there apart from what Mark had already discovered and had already published. And so I had this 3-hour-long conversation with him where he kind of took me gave me a behind-the-scenes look at all of the different factors and moving parts of the aborted baby parts trafficking phenomenon. Both what was released publicly and also information details that had kind of gotten lost in the mix. And I remember getting off of that phone conversation with him and being completely shocked, being very troubled. I think I got off the phone, I was crying, I had nightmares about it for the next week. Because at the heart of the trafficking of aborted baby body parts, there's this really cruel paradox that kind of cut me to the core back then 6 years ago, and I've never really been able to get over since then. And that's the fact that on the one hand in our country, the baby fetus, the humanity of the unborn child, is not considered to be fully equal enough to our own in order to be totally protected by the law and in order to be protected from the violence of abortion. But at the same time, it's precisely that humanity of theirs that is completely equal to and identical to our own. I felt that this issue in particular deserved to have, again, a very in-depth, long-term, sophisticated investigative journalism study done about it. That if we were going to have an abortion debate in our country, if it was going to be part of the popular discourse, if it was going to be mentioned in electoral campaigns, it ought to be this issue should be the tip of the spear. This issue should be on everybody's tongue, and it ought to be shouted from the rooftops, and it ought to be frontline news that baby body parts trafficking is the logical conclusion of the abortion institution that we have in our country. And so, like I said, there wasn't a whole lot of information out there about 6 years ago when this whole idea first came across my radar. But what I did discover after a little bit of work and after some helpful tips from some close friends, I had a good friend from Northern California originally, the Sacramento area. I had a good friend who was applying for pregnancy resource center jobs, for jobs in crisis pregnancy centers, and she'd gotten on the Craigslist in Sacramento, California, and was doing searches for jobs jobs having to do with pregnancy clinics and healthcare for pregnant women, things like that. And she came across an advertisement on Craigslist that was for a company called StemExpress that was explicitly advertising on Craigslist for people who could come and work at StemExpress as a procurement technician, who were proficient in human anatomy, and who could go into Planned Parenthood clinics to obtain pregnancy tissue, was what they called it. And sure enough, they had a website, StemExpress.com. I went to it. This was the first of these baby parts trafficking companies that actually had a website that I've come across, and they had all kinds of explicit information on the website about the fetal livers that they were selling, about the fact that they would even return a portion of their revenues to the abortion clinics that they worked with. So within this incredibly shadowy, kind of clandestine, esoteric world of baby parts trafficking, there was this one company that really stuck out from the fact that among all the other ones, they were actually pretty out and loud and proud about what they were doing. And so in many ways, the project that I and the Center for Medical Progress have done, the Human Capital Project, in many ways it didn't just begin with Planned Parenthood, it began with this company called StemExpress. StemExpress is what we call a tissue procurement organization. They're basically a middleman wholesaler of aborted baby body parts. In the past, when aborted fetal tissue first started to be used in scientific experimentation, you would have sort of this classic model of it where you would have a supplier abortion clinic, like a Planned Parenthood or a big hospital abortion clinic, that would partner directly with a local university laboratory or with a local biotech company. That model still exists in some places. Michigan is among the places where that's the way that it happens. But then there's also a newer model that is sort of the more viral version of that. And that's where you have this three-tiered system where you have an abortion clinic supplier, like a big Planned Parenthood surgical facility. You have an end-user university researcher or a biotech company or the R&D department of a major pharmaceutical company. And then in the middle, you have these middleman wholesaler companies like StemExpress or Advanced Bioscience Resources or Da Vinci Biologics, just to name a couple of them that exist right now and are operating in that space. And those middleman companies are the ones who have these specially trained harvesting technicians who go into the abortion clinics every morning with a list, with an order list of all of the orders that their customers have placed for baby body parts that day or that week. They go into the clinics every morning with that list of how many lungs, how many hearts, how many brains, how many livers, what gestational age each of them need to be, if there's a window of gestational age for them from, say, 18 to 22 weeks or 20 to 24 weeks. And they go in with that list to the clinic every morning. They identify the pregnant women who are coming in who match that gestational range that they're looking for. They sign them up. They wait. So StemExpress started up in 2010, partnering with Planned Parenthood Marmonti. Previously, the Marmonti affiliate had been working for many, many years with the company Advanced Bioscience Resources. They're the oldest baby parts company in the country. They were started in 1989, which is the same year that I was born. So that means that the very first babies that Advanced Bioscience Resources cut up and harvested their body parts and sold across the country, those children would be my age today if they'd not been killed by abortion and then parted out like used cars. So Marmonti originally was partnered with ABR. The founder of StemExpress, Kate Dyer, she used to work as a procurement technician for ABR. And then she got the idea that they were kind of a creature of the 1980s and she could actually run the business a lot better on her own. She could make some improvements and make it go more viral. So she actually left and took a lot of their client lists and a lot of their proprietary information and founded StemExpress and basically went to some of the local Planned Parenthood clinics and said, look, I can pay you more money than them for the fetal tissue. And so she was able to swipe the contracts away from the other body parts company. It also probably didn't hurt that StemExpress's medical director is a Planned Parenthood abortion doctor for Planned Parenthood Marmonti. So in many ways, this investigation began with this company StemExpress when I first came across them in 2011, I think it was. And StemExpress was interesting because they were a little bit more open than any of these other companies, or certainly more open than anyone body parts trafficking actually works. But it wasn't enough. Just the information that was available on their website certainly wasn't enough for a major expose and wasn't enough to tell the entire story of how Planned Parenthood partners up with these businesses to harvest and sell body parts for profit. There needed to be a lot more documentation, a lot more information, and I really especially wanted to find out what was Planned Parenthood's role and attitude about all of this. We knew what StemExpress's motivations were, we knew what their attitude was about it, but we didn't really have a lot of direct testimony from Planned Parenthood. And I didn't want to just get statements from low-level medical staff or even from a rogue clinic manager somewhere. I wanted to go to the very top because I wanted the information and the admissions that we were going to get from Planned Parenthood officials to be essentially unimpeachable, to be from people with such authority within the organization that what they said would be synonymous with the policy of Planned Parenthood because of the level of executive oversight that these individuals would have. And so the question was then, how do we get that kind of access? How do we get that kind of access into the Planned Parenthood world? And as I thought about it, I thought, well, we should do it in a way that won't be too complicated, do it in a way that won't be too easy for them to expose or too easy for them to figure us out. We should do it in a way that won't be too complicated for us to run so that we don't end up making a mistake in the process or tripping all over ourselves. And as I thought about it more, I thought, the most stable, serious way to do this is just to go about it as close to real life as possible. And so I decided we were going to have to basically pretend to be a company like StemExpress. We were going to have to go about it almost as if this was real life and we really were people who had this kind of clever and evil idea that we wanted to make money off of body parts and we were going to be a little startup company and go about to do that. So that's what we did, and there was early on when I first started working on the Human Capital Project full-time back in 2013, there was an opportunity that came along to kind of test that out and give that scenario a little bit of a test run and see how that would work. So some of you may be familiar with or might have heard about back in 2012, 2013, there was a pro-abortion documentary that was released called After Tiller. Raise your hand if you've heard of the movie After Tiller. After Tiller is an indie documentary film that is about the 4 most prominent late-term abortion doctors in the United States. It focuses on Dr. Warren Hearn, on Dr. Leroy Carhart, and on Dr. Shelley Sella and Dr. Susan Robinson. And they are the 4 most prominent late-term abortion doctors in the country. And certainly in the world of aborted baby parts trafficking, it's typically the later second trimester body parts that are most valuable and that are the most in demand. So there's a big connection point, there's a big crossover with the world of late-term abortion and later-term abortions with the world of aborted baby parts trafficking. So After Tiller was an important thing that I was tracking with. And I noticed I think it was April of 2013, so this was just about 3 years ago exactly, After Tiller was being shown at a film festival at UC Berkeley, and I was living in Northern California at the time, so it was not too far away. So I decided, well, I haven't seen the movie yet, I really need to see it as part of my just initial background research. I'll go there. And I thought, it is UC Berkeley, I don't want to be, caught, or I don't want anybody to really know who I am or why I'm there. So I'll be very careful not to, give my real name or really talk to too many people. So I went there, I had a recorder in my pocket, I figured, I might as well just in case anything happens. And I went there, I saw the movie, I took notes, it was very informative. But then it turned out that because this was a film festival, both the filmmakers and also one of the late-term abortion doctors from the film, Dr. Shelley Sella, was present at the theater. They were present there to do a question and answer session afterwards for all of the attendees. And so when the lights went up, and I kind of looked around, and the 2 feminist filmmakers and Dr. Sella was up there on the front stage, and then I looked around at the audience behind me. I was actually in the front row. And I looked around at the audience behind me, and it was basically a who's who of the Northern California abortion industry. The CEO of Planned Parenthood, Marmonti, was there with many of her lackeys. There was the entire clinic staff of 2 different abortion clinics in Northern California that was present there. There was multiple abortion doctors, and Dr. Shelley Sella herself, she both works doing the latest term abortions in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and she also works on a contract basis for Planned Parenthood in Northern California. So it was just a whole mix, really a who's who of the Northern California abortion industry there. And then I started to get a little nervous. I thought, wow, I better really fake it to make it here, because because this was it. I've been thinking to myself, how do you get access, right? How do you get access to the upper echelons of the abortion community, so to speak? And right there, I was there with them at the film festival in Berkeley, and I thought, wow, it was really this easy. I thought After Chiller was interesting. They love movies like this because they want to feel good about the horrible things that they do, and they're all right here waiting for it, and this is all I had to do. So I just I tried to chill a little bit, sat back, and just listened to some of the Q&A. And so I thought to myself, I'll ask her a question about baby parts. And I thought a little bit. I made up kind of a fake name on the fly, and I thought about how to best phrase the question in a way that wouldn't sound like a pro-life question, that would sound like I was a hardcore pro-abort. I asked my question, and I made a little joke in the process, and she thought that was funny, and so we were just kind of laughing at that, and the audience was friendly and laughing, and they appreciated the question. And it's not the fact that I asked the question and nobody was suspicious and I got the answer. That was significant. But what was also significant is, as she started to answer my question, Dr. Sella turned and she looked straight in my eyes. When she was up at the podium, I was probably about 50 feet away from her in the front row. And all of a sudden, I started to feel really dizzy. I felt really dizzy and nauseous, and it started to kind of get dark around the circles of my eyes, and it almost seemed like the walls of the theater were getting taller and like it was closing in. And I had to sort of grab the side of my seat not to fall over, and I thought, well, this is really weird. Did I, not eat breakfast this morning, or what's going on? And then it felt like there was some kind of tether that was reaching between me and her, and like it was being drawn tighter and tighter and tougher and tougher. And I felt really afraid all of a sudden. I felt like everyone in the room knew who I was, and like I was in a lot of danger. But I was thinking to myself, nobody here is suspicious. They all laughed at my joke, like they don't care what's going on. So I kind of shook it off, and she finished the answer, and I got over it, and I thought, well, that was weird. I must have ate a bad egg or a bad pancake or something for breakfast this morning. And I didn't think anything of it. Question answer ends. We all walked out of the theater, and I walked up to Dr. Sella afterwards outside just to sort of continue the conversation. We were joking, laughing about something, not suspicious at all. And then all of a sudden she turned and she looked straight in my eyes again, and this time we were face to face. And all of a sudden it was like this flash ran from one corner of her eyes to the other, almost like when the sun is glinting in the side of a car that's running through on the freeway. And then all of a sudden her eyes looked really hard and mean and threatening, and I felt this fear that I don't often feel. I often feel sadness or grief or anger or peace, but I don't often feel that fear, like that you want to run away. And I felt this fear like I was completely exposed, completely naked, like she knew who I was, she knew my name, she knew my sin, she knew everything about me. And it only lasted for about a second and a half, and then that flash came again, and then it was normal, and it was back to joking, laughing, not suspicious, nothing wrong. I've told that story a few times before, and so that whole experience, though, at the Berkeley Film Festival taught me two things. Number one, it showed me how easy it is, if you're clever about it, and you seek them out on their own terms, to get that kind of access to the inner, that this is one of the devil's playgrounds, and that the level of evil that we were going to be facing if we continued to look into this area was going to be bigger than anything you ever encounter in most of everyday life, or even in other areas of pro-life activism. And so it was clarifying. It was a really serious moment. It was scary for the second and a half that it happened, but it was also reassuring because it convinced me that this issue, more than any other that I could be working on, was something that was very important and something that had to be done, because if it made the enemy that angry to show himself like that it was something that had to be done because he was threatened, and this was the biggest blow that we could land for the kingdom of heaven. And so it was a very serious task. It was a very serious mission, and And so it was clear to me from that experience that this scenario is going to work. This idea of presenting ourselves as someone just like StemExpress, someone who was totally supportive of the abortion industry and wanted to just come up alongside them and partner with them and help them out and make things financially beneficial for them, that was going to be a winning scenario. I asked my spiritual director, what do we do if another situation happens like that? I said it was okay, to deal with that experience, looking at that thing for a second and a half. But I said I don't want to see that every day. I don't want to see that, every hour on the hour when I'm at an abortion meeting, an abortion trade show for 4 days. I don't know that I can handle that. And my priest gave us a very powerful prayer that served us very, very well for the entire duration of this project, which was about 30 months long. And he encouraged us to, number 1, pray for forgiveness for all enemies. And number 2, to pray that all curses would be turned into blessings. And number 3, to pray that those would return upon the sender 3 times. And that was our attitude, that was our mantra, that was our constant prayer during the entire 30 months of undercover work that went into this project. And I think that the results of that, the fruits that that yielded, are really, really evident for everyone to see. Because ultimately what that means is the attitude that we brought with us and the intentions that we brought with us into this project, it ultimately had to be done out of love. It couldn't be done out of anger. It couldn't be done certainly not out of hatred or out of anything like that. It had to be done out of a place of love both for our unborn brothers and sisters, and also out of a place of love for the people who are also our brothers and sisters, but who are doing things that are incredibly monstrous to other human beings. But even though they're doing things that are incredibly monstrous, there's still a core of humanity there that's valuable and that can be redeemed. Here in Michigan, you guys have a really interesting situation. I mentioned earlier in the talk that in the state of Michigan, from the information that we found through our undercover work, the baby parts trafficking in Michigan happens and has happened according to the older model, where the Planned Parenthood clinic partners directly with a local laboratory. Raise your hand if you've heard the name Dr. Lisa Harris, if that rings a bell for some of you. She's the medical co-director of the Planned Parenthood of Mid-South Michigan affiliate, which actually just recently merged with the other Michigan affiliate to now become the Planned Parenthood of Michigan affiliate, so she'll likely be the medical director of the whole thing. And Dr. Harris kind of made news in pro-life circles back in 2008 when she published an essay in a medical journal that was sort of a reflection on the reality of second trimester abortion and the visceral realities of dismemberment abortions and what it does to an individual, to a doctor who does this for a living and has to see the dead baby parts, has to perform the dismemberment day in and day out, and what it's like living with that and what it's like carrying that burden. And and Dr. Harris's essay was actually a very formative, seminal work in our training and in our study for getting ready to meet face-to-face and spend a lot of quality time with abortion doctors, because it was a really helpful window into the mind of a lot of the Planned Parenthood providers and into a lot of the conflicts and the emotions and the personalities that they carry. And so our investigators first met Dr. Harris at a meeting very early on in September 2013, and we kind of went through our scenario with her, and she confirmed, oh yeah, she said, at my Planned Parenthood, we collect fetal tissue for a variety of studies. And the information has come out since then that includes fetal eyeballs and decidual tissue and other body parts. And so she's on staff at University of Michigan, and she confirmed that the setup that they had here in Michigan was that the Planned Parenthood clinic supplies fetal tissue directly to researchers at the University of Michigan in exchange for block grants or some kind of block granted remuneration. And that's the model that was operative in Michigan. But what was interesting is that before we actually met her and before we started attending abortion conferences, we thought that maybe her essay was sort of an outlier, or I wasn't sure how common that attitude was among abortion providers. And what we ended up finding out is it wasn't that Dr. Harris was sort of the craziest or the most callous of the abortion doctors. It was actually that she was a very honestly conflicted person from my perspective, and that she wasn't just an outlier. She is actually just the most, just the loudest voice of many, many, many Planned Parenthood providers that feel exactly the same way, and she's the only one who's just standing up and saying it the loudest. And so that was one of the themes that came up again and again and again during the 2.5 years that we did this project, is this incredible ambivalence that a lot of the abortion providers had towards their work, and this incredible conflict between an honesty on the one hand, that they know exactly what they're doing, and they see the humanity of the baby every day, and they live with that violence, they carry that burden of suffering with them, of having to do that every day, but at the same time, they can't bring themselves to be completely honest with themselves about what they're doing, because if they did, then they would have to stop and walk away from it. Most people know her as the lady with the wine and the salad in the very first video, and that's certainly a big part of it. But I'll never forget, and it doesn't always come across on the video, it's a little harder to see on the video, but in person, I'll never forget the moments when she would start to talk about a specific aspect of the abortion procedure, or she would start to talk about a specific part of the baby and what she was doing to the part of the baby. And in those moments, in person, you would hear her voice start to get hoarser. Sometimes you would see her wipe her eye once or twice, and then she would kind of shake it off and steal up and sort of act like nothing had happened. But I'll never forget those moments, those moments of honesty and those moments of humanity that would still come through when we were taking them into that place of confronting and dialoguing with the humanity of the unborn baby. Those moments of humanity and honesty and even remorse and conflict that would show through and then would be covered up again so quickly. Seeing things like that during the course of the 30 months that we did this project were ultimately an incredible inspiration to me, which is, I think, one reason why I've sort of come back to them, and I sometimes talk about them in interviews and speeches. Because what that says to me, and it relates to the experience with Dr. Shelley Sella as well, is that even the deepest evil doesn't overcome God's creation 100%. Dr. Shelley Sella, the one that I saw, that look in her eyes and that really scary moment, when I encountered her after that several different times, I never saw that look in her face again, and I never saw that look in her eyes again. Instead, I saw someone who was very troubled by things that Dr. Harris would say about the humanity of the unborn baby. I would see someone who had a lot of concern and a lot of conflicts and a lot of turmoil about her everyday life. And so it was inspiring to me to see, on the one hand, to see so much monstrosity present in certain people and in a certain industry, but on the other hand, to see that even the deepest evil doesn't completely destroy the image of God. It doesn't completely overcome that there's still pieces of that original creation that shine through. The poet Dante, in his masterpiece, The Divine Comedy and the Paradiso, says that no one is so lost through his malediction that eternal love cannot return. And what I take from them still today, and what makes me so confident about the future of our country, about the future of abortion in our society, is that if the deepest evil can't completely blot out the image of God, even in the people practicing it, that it can't win in the end, and historically it can't overcome. And so I think that's a hope, and that's an inspiration that I carry with me every day that I'm still doing this work, that I'm facing up against Planned Parenthood in court, that I'm